The stories we believe. A Buddha reflection. I've started to notice something quietly shaping my life. Not what happens, but the stories my mind tells about it. And the more I watch it, the more I wonder, how much of my struggle is actually real? The story you carry. You notice it in quiet moments, perhaps when the day slows and there is nothing urgent to hold on to. A thought appears, and almost immediately it becomes a story. Someone spoke in a certain way, and the mind completes the meaning. A plan did not unfold as expected, and the mind explains why. I have seen this too, how quickly the mind tries to make sense of everything, as if clarity must be constructed rather than discovered. The Buddha observed this same movement not as a flaw, but as a habit of the mind seeking stability. Yet within that habit, a subtle tension grows. The story feels solid, but something inside remains unsettled. You begin to sense that what is being carried is not just the event, but the interpretation wrapped around it. And in that wrapping, the experience becomes heavier than it needs to be. The weight of interpretation. You may have felt it in relationships, how easily misunderstanding forms when two people hold different stories about the same moment. One assumes intention, the other carries a completely different truth. The distance between them is not created by reality itself, but by the certainty of interpretation. The Buddha did not rush to correct stories. Instead, he looked at how they arise. When you pause and observe, you begin to see that the mind is not reporting reality, it is shaping it. Like wind moving across water, it creates patterns that seem real, yet are constantly changing. And as this is seen, a small space appears. In that space, curiosity begins to replace certainty. The gentle question. What you take to be solid may be only a passing formation. There is a quiet shift when you stop asking whether your story is correct and begin wondering what is actually unfolding. The Buddha pointed not toward answers, but toward seeing. You remain interested, not defensive. This soft curiosity loosens the grip of fixed meaning. You notice that when you ask instead of assume, something opens. Conversations become less about proving and more about understanding. Even within yourself, the mind softens. The story no longer needs to be complete. It becomes something observed rather than something believed. The habit of escape. Beneath many stories, there is something more subtle. A discomfort that the mind is trying to move away from. You may notice how quickly attention shifts when unease appears. A distraction, a new thought, a sudden need to act. The Buddha saw this clearly. The mind does not only create stories to understand life. It also creates them to avoid feeling it. When discomfort arises, the mind reaches outward, searching for relief. Yet in doing so, it never truly meets the experience. And so the cycle continues, restlessness feeding on avoidance. Like waves stirred by constant wind. Sitting beside the feeling. What happens when you do not move away? At first, there may be hesitation. The belief that discomfort will grow if left untouched. But when you remain, even gently, something unexpected begins to reveal itself. The feeling shifts. Not because you forced it to, but because it was never fixed to begin with. The Buddha's way was not to remove discomfort, but to understand its nature. Like watching a wave rise and fall, you begin to see that the intensity changes on its own. The mind, once reactive, becomes observant. And in that observation, the pressure begins to ease. Insight, Perception, and Awareness Quiz. After you have listened, open the quiz tab. The questions reveal how you interpreted what you heard and invite you to notice the hidden logic in your reactions. Then, share your score in the comments. The nature of waves. All that arises passes when not held. You start to notice that feelings move in rhythms. Anxiety tightens, then softens. Sadness deepens, then lightens. These movements were always present, but they were hidden beneath reaction. The Buddha saw that resistance is what prolongs the wave. When the mind says this should not be here, tension builds. But when the experience is allowed, even quietly, it begins to complete itself. You are not controlling the wave. You are no longer standing against it. Familiarity with discomfort. Many emotions feel overwhelming simply because they have not been fully experienced before. Avoided repeatedly, they become unfamiliar, almost mysterious in their intensity. But when you sit with them again and again, something changes. The unknown becomes known. The fear softens. You begin to trust that you can remain present, even when the experience is not pleasant. The Buddha did not remove difficulty from life. He revealed that your relationship to it could change. And in that change, the same experience feels different. Less threatening, more understandable, part of a natural unfolding. The quieting of the mind. As the habit of escape begins to loosen, the mind slowly becomes quieter, not empty, but less crowded. There is less urgency to fill every moment, less need to move away from stillness. You may notice small things more clearly. The rhythm of breath, the subtle movement of thought, the space between reactions. The Buddha pointed to this simplicity not as something to achieve, but something already present when the mind stops interfering. In that quiet, life feels lighter. Not because problems have disappeared, but because they are no longer carried with the same weight of resistance. This is what is. Seeing clearly, the mind rests. There comes a moment when struggle softens into recognition. Not resignation, but clarity. You quietly acknowledge what is present without adding or subtracting from it. This simple phrase begins to carry depth. This is what is. The mind stops negotiating with reality. It no longer tries to reshape the moment into something else. And in that honesty, a grounded calm begins to appear. The Buddha saw that clarity does not remove difficulty, it removes confusion. And without confusion, the mind becomes steady. The end of argument. When the mind argues with reality, it splits itself. One part holds what is, another resists it. This division creates tension that feels exhausting over time. But when the argument ends, something reunites. Attention returns to the present moment. The breath becomes noticeable again. The body softens slightly. You are no longer caught between what should have been and what is. The Buddha's insight lives here, not in changing the moment, but in meeting it fully. And in that meeting, the inner struggle begins to dissolve. Energy returns. You may begin to notice how much energy was once spent resisting. Replaying the past, imagining alternatives, holding on to what cannot change. When this resistance fades, that energy becomes available again. Not dramatically, but quietly. It returns to awareness, to presence, to the simple act of being here. The Buddha described this as a kind of freedom. Not freedom from life, but freedom within it. The same circumstances remain, yet the mind is no longer bound in the same way. The illusion of the past. The past is remembered, not relived. Even as clarity grows, the mind may return to what has already ended. Memories appear with their emotional weight, as if they still hold something unfinished. But when you look closely, you see that the past exists only as thought. A reconstruction shaped by memory and meaning. The Buddha recognized that clinging to these images creates a subtle suffering. As this is seen, the grip loosens. The memory remains, but its authority softens. It becomes something you can observe rather than something you must carry. Letting the river flow. Life moves like a river, each moment passing into the next, never repeating in the same way. Yet the mind often tries to hold on to certain points as if they could be preserved. You may feel this in longing or regret, wanting something to return or wishing something had been different. But the river does not move backward. The Buddha did not ask you to forget the past. He invited you to see its nature. When you stop trying to hold the water, your hands relax. And in that release, the flow continues without resistance. Meeting the present. As attachment to the past softens, the present begins to feel more vivid. Not dramatic, but quietly rich. Small details emerge. Conversations feel more real. Even silence becomes meaningful. You are no longer divided between what was and what is. Attention settles here fully. The Buddha pointed to this not as a technique, but as a natural result of seeing clearly. In this presence, life feels less like something to manage and more like something to experience. Each moment complete in itself, without needing to become something else. The ease of understanding. Freedom comes not from changing the world, but from seeing it clearly. And so, something subtle completes itself. Not a final answer, but a quiet understanding. The stories still arise, feelings still move, life continues in all its changing forms. But you are no longer held in the same way. There is space where there was once contraction. Curiosity where there was certainty, presence where there was escape. The Buddha remains not as a distant figure, but as this way of seeing. A gentle intelligence within awareness itself. And as you continue, moment by moment, life feels lighter. Not because it has become easier, but because you are no longer carrying what was never yours to hold. This is Buddha Reflections, where philosophy, insight, and lived experience meet to explore mind, impermanence, and release. The conversation doesn't end here. Visit the quiz tab and share your score in the comments. Thanks for your time. It's been a delight. What should we explore next? Comment, share, and save your insight. Subscribe to Orbital Dharma and keep your thoughts bright.